Enterprise organizations routinely spend millions on advanced firewalls, threat detection systems, and dedicated security operations centers. Yet they still suffer catastrophic systemic breaches. When investigators analyze these incidents, they rarely uncover a mechanical failure. The encryption algorithms didn't break, and the firewalls didn't suddenly stop filtering traffic. The true failure point is almost always an operational bypass. An unprovisioned user account is left active, or a misconfigured permission grants excessive access, neatly sidestepping the expensive technology stack entirely. These bypasses happen for organizational reasons: missing security policies, poor accountability, and weak leadership. The effectiveness of a security program rests on business logic, regardless of the sophistication of the hardware. To master CISSP Domain 1, you must shift your perspective away from an engineering mindset and adopt an executive mindset. Relying solely on technical controls without strategic business alignment creates a false sense of security that guarantees an eventual breach. The mechanism that bridges this gap is security governance. This is the overarching system an organization uses to direct, manage, and control its entire security program. Governance answers the core structural questions of the enterprise. It dictates exactly who holds the decision-making power and who carries the ultimate accountability. It establishes explicit security goals and dictates how enterprise risks must be managed to ensure those goals are met. An environment without governance simply reacts to incoming threats as they appear. A governed environment manages those threats strategically before they materialize. This structure aligns technical operations with corporate priorities, moving security from a reactive expense to a business function. One of the primary reasons candidates fail the CISSP exam is confusing governance with management. We have to enforce a strict separation between the two. Governance is the strategic layer. It is owned exclusively by the board of directors and executive leadership. This executive group is responsible for setting the overarching organizational direction, defining the strategy, and determining the overall risk appetite. Below that line sits management. This is the operational layer, owned by the CISO and IT leadership. Management's role is to execute the strategy and handle day-to-day security operations. They achieve this by implementing specific technical and administrative controls. Notice the difference in motivation. Governance asks the strategic question, where are we going? Management asks the operational question, how do we get there? Without this divide, executives get lost in technical minutia, and engineers attempt to make business risk decisions they are entirely unqualified to make. To accurately carry the intent from the boardroom down to the server room, an organization uses a physical transmission mechanism called the documentation hierarchy. At the top are policies. These are high-level statements of management intent, establishing what must be done. They provide strategic direction, but deliberately do not explain how to implement it. Next are standards. These define specific, measurable technical baseline requirements to comply with the policy. For example, if a policy requires secure authentication, the resulting standard dictates a mandatory 14-character minimum length for all organizational passwords. Below standards are procedures. These are the step-by-step operational instructions required to implement a standard. Procedures answer the how. They dictate the exact commands a system administrator must execute to enforce that 14-character limit. Finally, there are guidelines. These are recommended, non-mandatory best practices meant to provide flexibility when strict procedures don't fit the situation. Without this rigid, interconnected hierarchy, high-level business goals degrade into operational chaos long before they ever reach the technical assets. The documentation hierarchy requires human accountability to be effective. The board of directors sits at the top of this chain. They provide oversight and officially approve the overarching security policies. Senior management supports this strategy by ensuring the security program receives adequate budget and resources. The CISO actively leads the program. They manage the enterprise risk and translate the executive's business needs into the technical standards. And the employees execute the procedures on the ground to protect the organizational assets daily. Connecting these defined roles establishes a chain of custody that directly answers external compliance obligations, like data protection laws and industry regulations. When external auditors evaluate a company, they're looking for this exact chain of custody to prove an organization is actually managing its risk. When you enforce strong role governance, passing regulatory audits simply becomes a systematic byproduct of daily operations, rather than a panicked, reactive scramble. Let's bring this theory back to reality by contrasting two enterprise architectures. In a model focused only on tools, disconnected systems fail to protect the business. The perimeter is full of gaps. In the governance-led model, the documentation hierarchy acts as a rigid skeleton. It perfectly aligns technical tools to eliminate those gaps and protect the asset. Technology supports governance, but governance drives technology. For CISSP candidates facing scenario-based questions, this dictates a clear strategy. When evaluating multiple choice options, always ask yourself, which answer best supports business objectives and risk management? The exam explicitly favors solutions centered on policy creation, executive oversight, and structural accountability over purely technical fixes. Mastering this specific mindset shift is the only way to transition from a technical practitioner to a certified security leader, because a properly architected boardroom is the ultimate prerequisite for an impenetrable firewall.